Oh, yeah, baby. Welcome back to the Big Idea to Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Jake Kelfer, and today we got a special guest. We got a Big Idea to Bestseller alumni in the one and only author of the book, The Truth About Being a Woman in Construction. Jessi Lynn is in the house. Jessi, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello, and thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So let's just start off right here, okay? You got a lot of really cool things behind you, okay? And for those that are just listening to this, Jesse's got this awesome backdrop of pictures of things, and the newest edition is a copy of Jesse's book. So talk to me, Jesse. What made you want to write a book, and how did you end up on this particular topic?
Yeah, so telling my story, right? Like that was definitely a thing that I had to process through initially, but going through all of my different experiences, childhood to being a welder to, becoming a construction manager and then a leader, there was just a lot of different aspects of my personal experience that I started to notice around me that other women especially and across minority groups were experiencing as well. And so I made the leap and invested in myself by writing a book to really help tell the story, to create the visibility, but also to do more, to catalyze the conversation and action within the construction industry, but also male dominated spaces, to throw some elbows and to really make a difference for those that either look like me, or just feel disenfranchised. So really creating more space and more inclusion around what needs to change within the construction industry itself, but also other very male dominated spaces.
Yeah, so it seems like there was the personal story that you wanted to share, but there was also the bigger purpose, which was really about bringing light, right, to
Absolutely.
women and, as you said, different minority groups, to male-dominated industries or other industries as well. And so I'm curious for you, what made you say, you know what, the book is the avenue that I'm going to use to express this, because there's a million things you could do, right? Why did you
Yeah.
decide that a book was going to be the most effective and most powerful for you?
For me personally, I have gone through my life trying to learn. Like I'm a lifelong learner. And so one of the things that I've noticed throughout my career, especially, is that there's just not a lot of individuals out there speaking to my experience. And so the book to me was a way of helping others be heard, be seen, and to be able to feel connected to those experiences. So the book was a way to hopefully encourage others, especially young girls and women, to either get into the industry or to even have kind of a how-to guide or a manual of some sort of like, okay, I don't have the rose-tinted glasses on anymore. Here's a reality, but also here's a potential financial freedom or a different way to look at potential career opportunities. So again, it was a way to really connect a lot of those personal experiences that I wasn't necessarily seeing or being able to read about that I
Mhm.
feel needs to be represented, especially as we look to the younger generation that's coming into the trades or even going into leadership roles.
It's really interesting to me. Let's talk about your background a little bit, because I think it's so important to tie into the story with everything that you've said and how you wrote this book and why you wrote this book. You mentioned welding, construction, leadership. And it seems like that was kind of the sequential order of kind of how you've continued to evolve, pivot, change, adjust, navigate your personal career. So why did you decide to get into the welding space? And was it something that you wanted to do from the get-go, or was it something that kind of fell into your lap? And then we'll go from there on how this impacted the future.
Absolutely. Welding definitely was not something I had considered. It wasn't something that was put in front of me as an option. So I grew up very poor, like definitely had some struggles, throughout my childhood. But one thing that I'm grateful for is the experiences of working both with my father and my mother in different aspects around trades, around landscaping. So very much early on, labor was part of just my upbringing and really, I guess, ethic, like work ethic was a thing. Like you didn't just lounge around. There's always something that needed to be done. So from an early age, there was like an appreciation for that. So by the time I got to high school and did accidentally fall into welding, it felt kind of at home in a way of like, oh, this is really interesting, unique, and like badass. Like, hey, I get to do something with fire. Like not really, but in essence, right? Sparks. And so kind of pulling that together based on my childhood experiences into high school, trying to navigate what is next. Welding just felt like something tangible,
Hmm.
interesting, and unique that I could potentially apply in different ways.
Yeah, I love that. You talk about work ethic. You talk
Yeah.
about that from a very young age. When you look at the experience of, your welding career, construction career, leadership career, and how work ethics played a role into your actual career, how did you find your work ethic translated to the process of writing a book? Did you find that it was easier than you thought, harder than you thought? Did you find yourself going to be very disciplined? What was that like for you based on your personality of work ethic?
I'm pretty sure like it definitely carried over. There was some discipline in there that I was able to kind of set. Part of it was being able to have a support structure to help me understand like here's the expectations, this is what it looks like, which gave me some guardrails to work within. But also being able to have that and then understanding, okay, I really do need to sit down and dedicate 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, made sense for that timeline. So for me, there was stressful moments with it, but the reward seemed greater. And the fact that I was learning something new, I think that also excited me. It's like, oh, I get to do this whole new process, this thing that I've never done before, and then be able to put it out there in the world and hopefully share that story that inspires the next realm of folks.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Talk to us a little bit about your process of creating this book. Was there anything that was different from your initial expectations? Was it easier? Was it harder? Tell me a little bit about how your experience was of working with us in this process.
Yeah, so I definitely really appreciate again the team that I was able to work with. It really helped me understand the different steps, what all is involved. So that was a big piece of it that helped create clarity for myself. But as far as like how I structured the book, I feel like this book in a way is kind of easier to write because I did timeline it. Like it was very much like in the beginning, Jessi was a welder. Like being able to kind of start there and then tell the story to more or less where I'm at today. So that was kind of the timeline. And then one of the bigger challenges that I really appreciated being able to work with an editor on was how do you tell that story in a way that simplifies it but doesn't oversimplify it, and then take some of those complicated topics and breaks it down in a way that people can understand. Because even though I'm from the construction industry, there are things that I'm like, oh yeah, ABC, this makes total sense to me. But, to most average person who might pick up the book, they're either learning about it, so they might not be familiar, or they're just like, oh, this seemed interesting. I have no idea what she's talking about. So being able to capture that and then provide resources on top of it, I think really made a huge difference in the overall process and being able to translate the story.
Yeah, there's typically a variety of different ways. And look, there's a lot of different ways people can actually write a book, right? We give you the process, but everyone's book is different because it's their book, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
something that's so beautiful. What we see a lot is that people go in the order of the process they want to teach. And then we see other people who go in the order of what they've lived and experienced, sharing the lessons along their way. What made you decide to go with your story first and in the timeline of your life versus taking a lessons first approach? What was that for you? Was it just because it was easier? Was it just because it felt right to you? Was there any, or was it just that's what you wanted to do, so you went for it?
So for me, it's the power. I think about the power of storytelling. Like even when I talk to individuals, like doing one-on-one or coaching, mentoring, consulting kind of deals, I am always referencing like resume. Resume is an opportunity to tell your story. So again, kind of going back to the book, it was an opportunity to story tell, to thread in those lessons learned, those experiences, those new terminology or aspects of the industry in a way that is digestible and understood. And so really it came back to how do I tell the story? Because if I did a lessons learned, like lessons focused approach and then told the story, it
Yep.
could potentially lose people. They're like, oh, I don't really want to hear this right now. Whereas if it's kind of pulled into with the story itself, it makes it more interesting. That's why we like Disneyland and we like, watching movies because we really like a story. And so that's really the reasoning behind how I wrote the book.
Amazing, amazing, and I think that that's very helpful because I think that there's so many people who have the idea of writing a book and they just get so stuck on like, well, it has to be this structure. This book that I
Mhm.
read has to be this way,
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
and I get it. It's easy to try to compare to overthink it, but when you talk about it just now, it makes it feel so doable, right?
Yeah.
Because there's nobody who's lived your story more than you. There's no one who understands your story better than you. There's no one who
Exactly.
can figure out how to connect the dots better than you. And then that's why
Mhm.
you have a team to help you with the editing and to polish it up and to make your personal life story and everything that you've experienced into a, as you said, digestible, easy to understand type of book. So let's talk about this as you're writing this book, okay, and you start getting ready to finish it. Was there any standout moments, or were there any moments where you were like, oh my gosh, it's really happening, or oh my gosh, like I can't believe I'm already done with this? Like, were there any moments for you that were big milestones on your way to launch?
Oh goodness. Yeah, there were definitely a few. For me, it was like what the first big one was the cover, watching the cover come together. Like fortunately, I was able to provide the initial thought, like here's what I want as a cover, or at least an idea, but being able to see that come to life with like my bio and the photo on the back more or less, it was just like, "Oh my gosh, okay." And then as we kind of went through the different revisions and editing, like as we got like a step closer to and watching like the story become more clear and tangible. And then even some of the folks that I was able to share the drafts with initially to get feedback and their overwhelming like support and interest. There was definitely those ongoing milestones of like, okay, yeah, this is happening, but also it has like, really good impact and oh wow, okay, people like it, they're gonna read it. So yes.
Yeah, it's so fun to hear where people have their like moments. And for you, it seemed like it was along the progression of production, right?
Mhm.
As each thing became out from the mind and became the tangible. That seems like it was really big for you. And so let's keep in that same theme. Let's talk about like launch. Okay. What was your launch like? What did you do? How did you feel? Tell us all about it.
Oh gosh, the launch was definitely stressful in its own way. I felt relatively secure and prepared for it. There's like things I reflected on I wish I had done probably more of individually. But yeah, it was great to be able to kind of make the countdown, right? To pull like different content together to help promote it. It was that week was a lot, just trying to make sure stuff was out there, floating, commenting, responding, just learning along the way of how to use Canva in new ways or even social media. So it was a lot of good things all at once. But at the same time, I personally like am excited about doing in my next book because there's things from that I was like, oh, okay, I'm definitely going to think about these things in advance.
Yeah. I want to talk about two things there. I want to talk about some of the positive things that came from all that, because when you launch a book, you're never more popular than when you launched a book, right? Everybody
Right.
wants access to, everyone's talking to you. But then there's also some things, as you mentioned, that things that you maybe would have liked to do a little bit differently. I would love to hear both. Let's start with the things maybe you would have liked to do differently or that you'll do on your second book, and then the things that went really, really well and some of the positive, amazing things that happened.
Yeah, so with the launch week itself, the big thing for me that I wish I had done in advance was content creation. Actually sitting through and figuring out, okay, what am I going to use? How am I going to pull it together? And then scheduling it. That was a big thing. And then even getting my email list together, which I had been working on that progressively up to the launch week, but I feel like I could have probably started that sooner. And then even preparing the goodies that I shared as like ways to engage people through the email and the texting, that all of that stuff could have definitely been done sooner. I think that would have helped ease a lot of the stressors I end up having
Yeah.
that first week.
With the content, I'm curious on this now, and this is for the listeners to also have an understanding of kind of where your starting point is, right? Because
Mm,
everybody's content creation is so different, right? So for
absolutely.
you, are you a big content creator already, or was this kind of, you mentioned learning in Canva, was this kind of more new to go at this volume and to do this type of content for you?
Oh, this was definitely new. I'm still getting used to like being on podcast, recording myself and posting that content on the social media. It's definitely something that I'm not entirely comfortable with, but I'm realizing it's a very important tool. So there was definitely a lot of learning as I was going. So definitely not an excellent pro content creator prior to, no.
Do you feel, and I'm actually curious about this because that is a lot whenever you increase your capacity, right? And you learn something new. Do you feel that because you wrote the book and because you knew that the book was worth you spending the time and energy to create the content, do you feel that
Mhm.
it in a way forced you to learn a skill that if you would need to have learned eventually, but it expedited that in terms of content creation?
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, the book is an investment, right? It's not, there's nothing inexpensive about writing a book. And on top of that, it's a time investment. So because of all these things that I'd already been doing to invest in myself and, trying to really build that mission and those values, it was a driver in many ways to say, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna learn how to edit like little short clips and make them interesting, and I'm gonna look up different resources, and again, like using Canva, what can I do in Canva? So yeah, it definitely helped bolster that a little bit
Mm,
more had I just been like, oh, I probably should learn how to do this thing over here.
yeah. And so let's talk about the positive things as well.
Yeah.
Um, what did it feel like? What were the results? What are some of the things that have happened since your book came out?
Oh goodness. I mean, I would say the whole experience was positive, albeit like stressful. But one of the big things that I have really been humbled by and I really appreciate is just the growing community and support. One of the things I think I did really well was even using like Instagram to start talking about the book in advance, well in advance before launching the book itself, being able to talk to people to help promote it, to really hear other individual stories as well, I think helped. But then on the other side of it, once the book was launched and especially women have been able to read it and like email me and message me and text me, it's just been such a positive and warm feeling of like, heck yeah, you did this. Like you got this out here and thank you for doing this.
Mm,
And so that, I mean, that has just been a huge, huge positive for me to, have that support and being able to connect with other individuals, feeling even in my own experience less alone in it, but then they themselves feel less alone because now there's this community that now knows of each other or may have known each other but didn't really talk before. So it's just, yeah, there's a lot of really good things that have happened because of the book. And I'm even like being able to do more podcasts. I'm getting asked to sit on panels and being able to even have another way to promote my social enterprise, Pivot Higher Plus. So yeah, it's just there's a lot of really good benefits from doing the book.
it's amazing to hear, and I'm glad you're experiencing that because it truly is one of the best feelings when your work inspires somebody else
Yes.
to make a positive change or to continue to do what they're doing in a better way. So, talk to me about this. The book is, all about everything that we've talked about. If somebody has yet to read the book, what would you say is the best part of the book? What is your favorite part of the book that might have the most impact? Give us a little teaser of like what people could look forward to when they get a copy.
Well, first, one of my favorite thing about books is photos. I have pictures in the book. So, hey, if you like pictures, there's pictures in the book. You can see little Jessie. So, pictures, I think is a huge plus. I would say I don't know if there's like one specific chapter of the book that I would say, hey, this is like if you had to read one thing, it would be that. What I would just offer is if you're feeling alone, you're feeling stuck, you're feeling isolated, and I really don't think it matters what industry you're in. This book can really be a source of hope and inspiration, but also feeling less isolated on your journey because you really aren't alone. We all are experiencing very similar things, especially again as women in the construction space. It's a really hard place to be in, but also know that there's others that are struggling with you as well.
Hmm. And so what I want to piggyback off that to kind of bring us full circle here. Let's say someone is feeling alone in whatever industry they're in and whatever they're doing. Maybe hope isn't at an all-time high. What would be
Yeah.
one piece of parting advice that you would leave a potential reader with or somebody who's experiencing that situation?
Network, network, network. It is like your superpower. And I know that it can be very overwhelming. Like I'm an introvert, so I definitely struggle with it. But there are different ways to network. And so I would say if you are in that place and you don't know what to do or you're feeling stuck, turn to social media, turn to some of these groups where it's like women in the trades or women in tech or whatever it might be. Turn to those groups and, find a way to connect with other individuals. And that even itself has a safe barrier because you're not in person. So you can present yourself, you can talk about things in ways that may make you feel less likely to be targeted. But I would encourage networking. I mean, it's an amazing superpower, even as I talk to women who are looking to transition even into the trades or in their careers in general. There's so much that can come out of networking, whether it's landing a new position, learning something new, or even being able to get involved in new opportunities or projects. So yeah, networking, like it really is, it's something that we, especially as women, need to get a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable with.
Yeah. Okay. I got to ask one more follow-up question to that because I love that answer.
Okay.
When you think of networking and you think of, you mentioned that you're an introvert.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite ways to network in today's world?
So there's two things that kind of jump out for me to share, at least in this moment. First one is, again, as an introvert, we live in the age of different channels, different social media channels, different technologies. What I would recommend is using LinkedIn and cold calling, cold messaging people. That's a safe way to you get to go kind of vet the individual and see where they're at, see if there's interest or things that they're working on that you find interesting. And you can message them, just say, hey, I'd really like to spend 15 minutes over a phone call, a Zoom call, whatever it might be, a cup of coffee, and learn more about your journey, your path, or something they might have even posted. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is when you do go to those larger like networking events, take something with you. Take a notepad, take a little notebook, something with you to write in. And don't feel like you have to go around and talk to everybody in the room. Honestly, one of the things that I have found very fruitful is when there's presenters, usually there's something that's put up on a screen, take a photo of that, but get names of the individuals and then go find them on LinkedIn or go find their email, maybe on a
Mm,
website of their business. Reach out to them one-on-one after the bigger networking event and just say, "Hey, I really appreciated what you were talking about or how you presented." And so that gives you a safe space and a little bit of distance and time to reflect and then create that more intimate moment with those
mm.
individuals instead of feeling like, oh, I have to fight over 20 other voices that are around me and they might not hear everything I have to say, or I might get distracted or I might get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I like that piece because it reminded me of kind of how I like to network, and I've I wrote my second book on networking, and my strategies have changed over the years. Okay, with new
Yeah.
information comes new decisions, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things that I used to do when I would go to networking events is I had this mentality if I'm going to go to the networking event, and this was also when I had less funds and less knowledge. I would be like, I'm going to this networking event. I got to meet every single person that I can because the number of people that I meet is going to translate to the results that I'm looking for, to the relationships that I want. But what I've realized as I've gotten older, as I've really learned how to leverage great networks, is that instead of trying to just focus on a quantity of people you've met, you got to focus on the depth of it. So what I like to
Yes.
do now is I still love to meet everyone. I'm an extrovert. So I'll meet everybody, but I've given myself permission that if I meet somebody and there's not that instant spark or there's
Mhm.
not that like, oh my gosh, let's actually chat through this. It's more of just a hey, great to meet you. That's
Yeah.
okay. And
Mhm.
so I allow myself that permission to be myself, but not put pressure on making everybody a best friend. And
Yes.
instead, I focus on trying to develop a couple really strong relationships that allow me to continue to develop that. And that's allowed more space for miracles. That's
Yeah.
allowed for deeper connection quicker. And it's also relieved so much of the pressure that I've used to put on myself of going to these networking events. And so I'd love your advice on what you're talking about, especially with the presenters. Don't go and everyone's going. Try to find, your secret way. Find your in because there's
Yeah.
names are out there, pictures are there, and you can always find your way in. So I love that. Is there anything else that you want to share related to that? I can tell that you like talking about this stuff. So is there anything else that you want to add there?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. Like intentionality, I feel like is going to create more of a successful connection. You're going to grow the right network for you where you're at if you spend some more time being intentional instead of, oh, I have to meet everyone. which great if like you're an extrovert, fantastic. But realistically, like you being able to identify those two, three people in that room, you go have conversations with them and you learn about different or similarities or differences that you like just mesh on. That can then also open up three more connections per like it really does become a web of like, okay, I've met these three really great people and we align and we get and we're supporting. Well, great, those three great people are going to introduce you to another three great people. And so it really does help create a really robust network for yourself.
Mm,
And one thing I will add, just as someone who can get overwhelmed in those bigger situations, is if you're not comfortable and you've been there for 15 minutes and you're just feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to leave. You do not have to stay.
mm,
That is something I have personally fought with is like, oh, it's 2.5 hours. I gotta be there for 2.5 hours. If I'm not, then I'm not getting my money's worth or I'm not gonna meet the right people. Sometimes it's just not the right day and it's not the right function. So give yourself that grace and be like, I'm just not feeling it. Something's off today,
mm.
whatever it might be, and leave and then just, maybe follow up on the next event and try it out. And again, if it's not the right one, then that's okay too.
My final question for you related to this and tying it to the book and your whole experiences is when you are in a position in your case, right, being a woman in construction in a male dominated industry, and women are underrepresented in that industry.
Yeah.
Where do you get the confidence, or what are your approaches to networking within that space where you are the underrepresented person, or maybe you feel a little bit out of place initially, or maybe you don't have the same level of hope as other people might? How do you still, especially as an introvert, how do you still put yourself in a position to be able to network and succeed?
I think this is an ongoing question, an ongoing struggle. I feel like as I get older, it's a little bit easier. One of the things that I have actually mentioned on another podcast, and it might sound, I don't know, it might sound very interesting or not, but one of the things that really solidified and have encouraged me at this point in my life and career is actually going back and doing my MBA, a very expensive confirmation, I would add. But when I went through the MBA, there were things that I was learning and practicing and implementing that really reinforced things that I had been doing prior that I was getting in trouble for, which seems very silly, but humans are messy, humans are complicated. And so the nice thing with doing the MBA, not only did it reinforce my skill sets and my knowledge base, but it did act as a confirmation of the aspects, the initiatives, the processes, things that I really felt mattered and were building on and implementing. So now on the other side of it, I continue to do those things and I try to leverage that and encourage that with other people around me. And there's still those situations where I get in where it's like maybe I am the only woman in the room or at the table. It still happens. And the best that I can do is recognize my leadership, my knowledge isn't going to change just because somebody else at the table has a different opinion. Am I still producing quality work? Am I still showing up in the way that's authentic and meaningful? That to me is what matters most. And so
Mm,
that's what I try to keep in mind when I sit in situations where it's like, ooh, this doesn't feel so great. But what am I doing? I'm staying true to myself and I'm going to continue on with that.
mm,
And I also vent, like I have my close knit of friends and family and, being able to have those safe spaces to connect and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Am I spiraling? Did I miss something? And, sometimes it is me. Sometimes I, got in my head and, went down that rabbit hole. But again, having that reinforcement and that support and just learning life is very interesting and it's going to have ups and downs.
yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. So for everyone that's listening to it, they're enjoying you. How do they get a copy of your book? How do we work with you? Give us all the goods.
All the details. Yeah, so the easy way to get my book is actually on Amazon, Truth About Being a Woman in Construction. There is the hard copy and then there's the digital. And of course, if you want a signed copy or just to learn more about my journey, I do have a book website, The Truth About Women in Construction. Check that out. And then of course, if you're interested in getting in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, JLyn89, or you can find me at pivothire.coach. That is my Pivot Hire Plus business website. And then my email jessica.lynn@pivothire.coach.
Amazing. And we'll link all that good stuff up there. But Jessi, it's It's been awesome to chat with you and converse and to hear about your book journey and to hear about your networking tips and to hear about how you've grown your career in many different ways. And so I just want to thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for hooking me up with such a wonderful team. I mean, Mikey and Carly were just amazing in helping me get through the whole entire process.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad you had a wonderful experience. Now, for everybody who just listened to this, first of all, grab a copy of Jessi's book online. And as you know, we end every episode here with a challenge. So here's my challenge based on a few of my takeaways is I want to challenge you to reach out to somebody in your field that you've thought about reaching out to, but you haven't. Maybe because you don't think they'll respond, or you don't think you're ready for it, or maybe you don't think they're at the same level as you. I don't really care. What I do care about is I want you to take the person, and I know everybody has a person that they can think of that they've been wanting to reach out to, but you're holding back. My challenge to you is to do that, to reach out to that person, take some of the advice from this episode and what Jessi said, and reach out to that person and let us know what happens. If they don't reply, guess what? There's so many other people. If they do reply, amazing. If they reply and it's awesome, even better. If they reply and it sucks, well, you still did the thing. And the more we do the things, the easier they become. So that's what I have for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.